Chapter 1671. Yes or no? Shenzing asked. She suddenly felt like her intelligence had returned. If she could secure this promise from Tang Wuling, then that would be the equivalent of a promise from the Tang sect and Shrek Academy. That would be immeasurably beneficial both to herself and her family. A wry smile appeared on Tang Wuling's face. You're asking for way too much. How about one favor instead? Shenzing immediately shook her head without any hesitation. It has to be 3. Otherwise, why don't you abduct me again? You're used to using violence anyway. However, I have to warn you that there are many new detection soul tools in our Central Legion that you've most likely never even heard of, so I can guarantee that you have no chance of reaching the Battle God Hall. Tang Wuling knew that this wasn't an empty threat. Ling Zichen had already told them that the Central Legion was beginning to use many experimental weapons and soul tools, and even she didn't know what the federal scientists had been developing lately. Otherwise, he wouldn't have gone to the trouble of finding Shenzing. 2 favors. Tang Wuling bartered. Shenzing immediately turned to leave. Fine, 3 favors it is. Tang Wuling sighed in a resigned manner. It was extremely important for them to enter the Battle God Hall in a peaceful fashion. A hint of elation appeared on Shenzing's face, and she turned back around with a smile before taking a seat at the table again. A promise is a promise. Tang Wuling replied. As long as you don't ask me to do anything that goes against my morals and ethics. Don't worry. What kind of person do you take me for? Shenzing replied in a casual manner. Tang Wuling couldn't help but scoff internally. After all, he had no idea what type of person she was. All right, when do you plan to go to the Battle God Hall? I'll arrange it. Shenzing had suddenly transformed into a professional lieutenant colonel. Tang Wuling replied, as soon as possible. How are you going to take us to avoid the examinations? Shenzing rolled her eyes in response. Don't you know what my role is? I'll just forge some identification badges for all of you. Shenzing was currently a very high-ranking official in the identity verification department of the Central Legion, and that was why Tang Wuling had decided to approach her. All right, I need 10 identification badges. Tang Wuling said. 10. There are 10 of you. Shenzing exclaimed. An exasperated look appeared on Tang Wuling's face. Why don't you shout even louder so the entire Central Legion can hear you? Why are there so many of you? I'm not omnipotent. How am I supposed to get all of you into the Battle God Hall? Shenzing countered. Tang Wuling shrugged in response. You already agreed, and I trust in your abilities. You can take us in groups. As long as you can bring us into the Battle God Hall, your mission will be complete. Shenzing grumbled. Then how are you coming out? There's no way all of you can avoid detection. I don't have the ability to ensure your safe exit. A mysterious smile appeared on Tang Wuling's face. You don't need to worry about that. We'll take care of that on our own. Do you think a general will be barred from exiting the Battle God Hall? An indecisive look appeared in Shenzing's eyes. Then about the condition I raised. Stop right there. 3 favors is all I'm willing to give. If you ask for any more, then I'll be forced to abduct you again. Tang Wuling threatened as he intentionally took a glance at Shenzing's body. In that instant, it was as if he had been possessed by an old demon, and Shenzing couldn't help but shudder in fear. You wouldn't dare. Tang Wuling smiled and returned to normal. Like I said, it's not like it hasn't happened before. Shenzing really wanted to wipe that smile off his face, but she had to admit that he was right. There was nothing that she could do. Tang Wuling was at least a title Douluo, and no ordinary title Douluo at that, so there was no way that she could contend with him. Tang Wuling continued. All right, you can tell me how you plan to sneak us in now. Shenzing glowered at him with a resentful expression, but Tang Wuling remained completely unmoved. After taking a deep breath to calm herself down, Shenzing said, I need to go back and make some preparations first. Give me your soul communicator number. Tang Wuling did as he was told. Shenzing stood up to leave. I'll contact you when I'm ready. Tang Wuling looked on as she departed, and on this occasion, he didn't stop her. Instead, it was Shenzing who suddenly turned back around and asked, aren't you afraid that I won't keep my promise? As long as I don't come out of the Central Legion, you can't do anything to me. Tang Wuling replied with a genuine expression. I trust you. You. Shenzing had no response to this, and she could only stomp her foot before quickly departing. Tang Wuling looked on as she departed with a contemplative look in his eyes. Did he really trust Shenzing? Of course she couldn't be fully trusted. Unbeknownst to Shenzing, the Tang sect's most cutting-edge tapping device, which was only the size of a grain of rice, had been silently planted on her by a blue silver emperor vine. These tapping devices had built-in disruptive features, which could disrupt detection from all soul tools. Tang Wuling dialed a number on his soul communicator and said, test out the tapping device. All right. Ling Zichen's voice rang out from the other end. After that, he paid the bill and departed. After leaving Xingmei Holiday Resort, Tang Wuling returned directly to the Tang sect mansion. The conference room was already filled with all types of devices, and Ling Zichen was quickly tapping away while sitting in front of 3 screens. A map of the Western Mountains was depicted on the 3 screens, and there was currently a small red dot quickly moving along the map, clearly indicating Shenzing's location. Shrek's 6 monsters, Araheng, and Sima Jinkai were also present, and for some reason, all of them turned to Tang Wuling with rather peculiar expressions. Why are you all looking at me like that? Tang Wuling asked. Ling Zichen chuckled coldly. You know what you did? A speechless look appeared on Tang Wuling's face. What do you mean? What happened? She couldn't help but burst into laughter, while Ling Zichen pressed a button, and said, have a listen to this replay. A burst of static rang out, followed by a thump that sounded like a car door being closed. Bastard. 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 Why is it him again? Have I not been tortured enough by all those nightmares? Why has he come to see me again? The voice being played naturally belonged to none other than Shenzing. Nightmares? About me. Tang Wuling pointed at himself, and everyone nodded in unison with sly expressions. I finally stopped having those embarrassing dreams. Why did he have to come and see me now? I really want to kill him. Why did I agree to his request? I'm going against my moral code as a soldier. What the hell's wrong with me? I don't even know what to think anymore. It's all Big Sister's fault for forcing me to go on these blind dates. He definitely did something to me back then to make me have all those dreams. He's poisonous. I hate him so much. Chapter 1672. It was very apparent to Tang Wuling that Shenzing's feelings toward him went beyond just resentment. He was no longer the naive and ignorant young boy he once was, so it wasn't difficult for him to read between the lines. Ling Zichen was currently looking at him as if he were a massive pervert. Why are you looking at me like that? I never did anything. Everyone was present when we first met. Asked them. Tang Wuling said with a resigned expression. Ling Zichen repeated, you know what you did. Tang Wuling raised a hand to put an end to this topic. All right, setting that aside. Did she say anything useful? Not yet. She's currently driving back from the restaurant. Yue Hengyu replied. Tang Wuling replied, then keep listening on her. I'm going back to my room. He was also quite perplexed by Shenzing's reaction. Could it be that the illusions created by the 7 old demons had left some type of lasting trauma on her? With that in mind, a hint of guilt welled up in Tang Wuling's heart. He didn't think that he had caused such a huge problem in Shenzing's life. That was never his intention, and it was not what he wanted to see. To his surprise, just as he was about to go into meditation that night, he suddenly received a call from Shenzing. There's an opportunity coming up in 2 days, where a group of personnel are returning from a mission. You guys are all adept in disguising yourselves, right? Stop them on their way back and knock them out, but don't hurt them. After that, you can impersonate that group, and I'll take care of the rest. Shenzing's voice was completely calm and devoid of the emotion she had vented in her car. Tang Wuling replied, thank you. Will this cause any trouble for you? Shenzing replied, I'll make it seem like a system error, so no one will discover anything. Don't you know that I'm a soul computer expert? Tang Wuling replied, all right, I hope this won't cause any trouble for you in the future. Shenzing harumphed coldly in response. Why? So you can continue using me. Tang Wuling hurriedly replied, please don't misunderstand. If my past actions have affected you in any way, then I apologize again. After this, I won't disrupt you any further. Also, regarding the 3 favors, you can contact the Tang sect at any time to redeem them. Shenzing didn't say anything further and merely ended the call. At the Central Legion, a military cargo vehicle slowly drove toward the foot of the mountain where the Legion was situated. After a series of thorough examinations, the soldiers responsible for conducting the examinations extended a military salute toward the driver, and the vehicle slowly traveled into the Legion along its designated route. The driver was Shishi, while Tang Wuling was in the passenger seat. At this point, they had all disguised themselves into the soldiers originally in the vehicle. There was no need for Tang Wuling to look around. His spiritual power more than sufficed for examining his surroundings. As expected of the Federation's most powerful legion, not only was the Central Legion extremely tightly guarded, it was filled with all types of of advanced detection equipment. According to extinction, the Federation had even developed detection devices capable of discovering storage cell tools, and those devices were able to instantly glean the contents of the storage cell tools that they scanned. The tapping device planted on Shenzing verified that she hadn't been up to any suspicious activity, and the operation commenced as planned. After entering the Central Legion, they drove straight onward according to the directions that Shenzing had given them in advance. This military vehicle that they had hijacked was responsible for transporting some daily necessities to the designated warehouse. With so many people in the Central Legion, a massive amount of resources was required, and there were many supply vehicles like theirs that entered the Legion every day. This one had been chosen as the number of people in the vehicle just so happened to be 10. The vehicle arrived at the designated location, and the supplies were quickly unloaded. They had finally arrived in the Central Legion. Generally speaking, the internal security of legions were far more lax than the external side, and the Central Legion was no exception to this. There weren't that many examinations in the Legion, and the identification badges provided to them by Shenzing granted them easy passage. Wherein, Tang Wuling said into his soul communicator. Shenzing replied from the other end, I can see your current location. You're in luck. I heard that there aren't that many powerful beings currently in the Battle God Hall. Travel along the route I planned for you. All of the detection devices on that route have already been altered by me. Barring any mishaps, you should be able to reach the Battle God Hall without a hitch. All right, thank you. This is likely going to be our last contact, so thank you once again, Tang Wuling said. Shenzing was silent for a moment before replying. You have to come out alive. Otherwise, you won't be able to complete those 3 favors. Don't worry, I know what I'm doing, Tang Wuling reassured with a smile. He then ended the call before turning to his friends. Let's go. Tang Wuling currently had a set of captain epaulets on his shoulders, and he was the leader of this group. After emerging from the warehouse, all of them made their way toward a certain direction at a natural speed. The path outlined by Shenzing was firmly ingrained in Tang Wuling's mind. All they had to do was continue onward, and they should be able to pass through the Central Legion to reach the entrance of the Battle God Hall. The Central Legion encompassed virtually the entirety of the Western Mountains, and there were all types of large cell facilities in the Legion. From the Western Mountains, the Legion could come to the defense of Bright City at a moment's notice. The Battle God Hall was situated on the peak of the tallest mountain in the Western Mountains, so there was a climb up ahead. After passing through 2 high-security areas, they arrived at a plaza halfway up the mountain. This was a market inside the Central Legion where all soldiers and military officials could purchase or trade for items to satisfy their daily needs. This was also one of the only places in the Legion that was often quite lively and bustling. In order to reach the mountain summit, it was necessary to pass through here. The market was an extremely rowdy place, perhaps due to the fact that everyone was normally overly subdued in the Legion. There were soldiers chatting together, buying things, and having drinks. Alcohol was banned in the Legion except for in Xingmei Holiday Resort, so the drinks primarily consisted of tea and coffee. Tang Wuling and the others naturally paid no heed to this, and quickly made their way through the market. Look at who it is. Huang Ziran, where are you going in such a hurry? A military official with captain's epaulets suddenly appeared in Tang Wuling's way. Huang Ziran? Huang Ziran? Tang Wuling knew that this was the name of the identity he had adopted. Ling Zichen immediately began to tense up, but Tang Wuling made a surreptitious reassuring hand gesture behind his back. What do you want? He asked in a cold voice. Judging from this man's attitude, it was clear that he wasn't on good terms with Huang Ziran. What do I want? You were the one who reported me, right? Don't tell me it wasn't you. Own up like a man. The captain spat onto the ground in a disdainful manner as he spoke. A bunch of tall and well-built soldiers quickly gathered behind him, appraising Tang Wuling with animosity in their eyes. Tang Wuling asked, what do you want to do? Chapter 1673. The captain continued, you reported me, but look what's happened to me. Nothing. If you know what's good for you, then kowtow and apologize, then compensate me, and I'll let bygones be bygones. Otherwise, I'll give you a beating every time I see you. You'll be forced to withdraw from the Legion. Tang Wuling couldn't help but scoff internally upon hearing this. Wasn't the Central Legion a legion of elites? Why was there scum like this around? Tang Wuling gave the captain a derisive glare before making a provocative hand gesture. If you're a man, then fight me one-on-one. If you win, I'll let you do as you please. But if you lose, then piss off. As a past soldier himself, he knew that power was most revered in the military, and that one-on-one battles were the simplest way to resolve conflicts. This was how he had tamed Jiang Wuyu back in the Blood God Legion. So, are you scared? Tang Wuling raised his chin slightly in another provocative gesture. Fight. 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 Sure enough, there were already soldiers urging for the fight to take place. Life in the military was simply far too bland and boring, so one-on-one fights were very attention-grabbing. You dare to challenge me? Great. I'm going to knock all of your teeth out. The captain lunged toward Tang Wuling, throwing a punch directly at Tang Wuling's face as he spoke. Tang Wuling was rather surprised by the power and speed of this punch. This was definitely not a punch that a normal soldier would be capable of unleashing, and his fist was even imbued with soul power. Tang Wuling slapped the captain's fist, and even though he had intentionally held back, the captain was still sent stumbling backward. Tang Wuling then raised a leg and aimed a vicious kick at the captain's chest, sending him flying back 5 to 6 meters. Everyone immediately fell silent upon seeing this. The captain that had provoked Huang Ziran was quite powerful among military officials of his rank, and no one anticipated that he would be handled so easily by Huang Ziran. Bastard. The captain instantly sprang to his feet, and 4 soul rings emerged from beneath his feet, comprised of 3 yellows and 1 purple. At the same time, his arms expanded noticeably, particularly his fists, which had taken on a metallic grey hue. This captain's name was Deng Shun, and his martial soul was his fists. He hadn't cultivated them to the body martial soul level yet, but he was still an extremely powerful being among captains, which was why he was so arrogant. He had been reported by Huang Ziran for taking rebates while purchasing supplies, and he wasn't punished too severely due to the connections he had, but this avenue of earnings had been cut off, so he was naturally quite resentful toward Huang Ziran. Tang Wuling heaved a faint internal sigh. This was rather troublesome, and he had to end this battle as quickly as possible. He was currently impersonating Huang Ziran, but he didn't even know what Huang Ziran's martial soul was. A disguise was easy to arrange, but emulating a martial soul was far too troublesome, especially in the presence of so many people. His main concern was that a high-ranking military official would step in, and that would be disastrous. Thus, after a brief moment of contemplation, Tang Wuling sprang forward without any hesitation. Deng Shun threw a vicious right punch, unleashing his second soul skill, Iron Fist. At the same time, right before Tang Wuling was about to be struck by Deng Shun's fist, he dodged to evade the attack, then grabbed onto Deng Shun's right wrist before aiming a kick at his shin, sending him flying once again. On this occasion, Deng Shun was very unlucky, and his head struck a wall, upon which he immediately fainted. Tang Wuling dusted some imaginary lint off his shoulders, and scoffed. Pathetic. Who else wants to have a go? Everyone's expressions had changed drastically at this point. He had just taken care of Deng Shun so easily without even using his martial soul. This was a truly stunning display of power. All right, take him to the infirmary, Tang Wuling said before departing, and everyone else in his group had already split up, but they were all making their way toward the same direction as well. Hold on. A loud cry suddenly rang out. Tang Wuling stopped before turning to discover another captain appraising him with a suspicious expression. You're not Huang Ziran. Huang Ziran is still recovering from an illness he contracted a few days ago, and he's only a sole grandmaster. How could he possibly defeat Deng Shun? Who are you? The captain interrogated. Tang Wuling heaved an internal sigh, then transmitted a message of reassurance to his friends through his spiritual power before making his way toward the captain. I had intended to hide my power, but it looks like I'll have to reveal some of it to silence pesky little pests like you. Who told you I'm only a sole grandmaster? Who told you I'm not Huang Ziran? He tossed his identification badge forward as he spoke, and at the same time, 6 soul rings, comprised of 2 yellows and 4 purples, rose up from beneath his feet, revealing him to be a soul emperor. The majority of people present were normal soldiers, and the rest were all low-ranking military officials, and they couldn't help but stumble back in the face of the soul emperor level aura that Tang Wuling was releasing. Tang Wuling stopped around 3 steps away from the captain before making an inviting hand gesture. Check to see if that's my identification badge. The captain hurriedly examined the badge using his soul communicator, and there were naturally no issues with it. Tang Wuling harumphed coldly. I didn't want to reveal everything this early, but it looks like I have no choice. Deng Shun has taken rebates on multiple occasions while purchasing supplies, and he harbored resentment toward me after I reported him. I don't know why the higher-ups didn't punish him, allowing him to come and confront me. All of these people must be his lackeys, and I'm going to report them all to the higher-ups again. If one were to look closely into Tang Wuling's eyes, they discover faint purple light flashing within them, and at this point, the expression on the captain's face had become completely vacant. Through the use of his immense spiritual power, Tang Wuling had forcibly read the captain's memories. At the mental manifestation level, Tang Wuling still couldn't read one's complete memories, but with such a massive disparity in power, it was a simple matter for him to read a few memory fragments, and those were enough for him to string together the full story. Thus, he immediately declared the reason behind Deng Shan's vendetta toward him, thereby further proving his identity. Punish them. A loud cry suddenly rang out. I was wondering why my toilet paper was so hard and thin. It's all because of these scumbags. Another vehement voice quickly rang out. Our female sanitary products are also of a very bad quality. This must be why. We can't just let things slide. Let's all report them together. All of the surrounding soldiers were stirred up into a frenzy. Deng Shan had just been helped to his feet, and he hadn't even regained his consciousness before he was completely surrounded, as was the captain who had just interrogated Tang Wuling. Chapter 1674. Take them to the military law department. Tang Wuling yelled. The situation had become quite heated and chaotic, and the thing that the military feared the most was internal turmoil. At this moment, he was fanning the flames by infusing his words with some of his spiritual power, and all of the soldiers had become extremely worked up. Meanwhile, everyone else in Tang Wuling's group had already snuck away toward the mountain peak, and Tang Wuling quickly followed suit. Thus, they finally managed to pass through the market, and Tang Wuling was able to heave a faint sigh of relief. At this point, everyone else had already separated. He had instructed everyone to go on ahead, as it would be far easier to handle the situation on his own. The ones who had stayed behind were Sima Jinkai, Araheng, and Ling Zichen, and they were the ones who had been complaining about the toilet paper and female sanitary products. As a result, all of the soldiers had been stirred up into a frenzy, allowing them to sneak away without being noticed. Thus, they quickly sped up the mountain toward the entrance of the battle god hall. As expected of an outstanding soul computer expert, Shenzing had reset the entire internal soul system of the Central Legion, granting Tang Wuling's group smooth passage. The higher they scaled up the mountain, the fewer detection soul tools there were. Most of the Central Legion's facilities were focused on the bottom half of the mountain, while the top half belonged to the battle god hall. Regardless of whether it was in the military or the Federation, the battle god hall had a transcendent status. Finally, they reached an altitude of 2,500 meters above sea level, and the entire mountain peak above this point was covered in snow. Tang Wuling couldn't help but think back to the Blood God Legion upon seeing this. Back then, she was still by his side. Right at this moment, a metal ball with a probe attached to it descended from above before stopping in front of Tang Wuling's group. Stop. You're about to enter the territory of the Battle God Hall. Do you have a recommendation letter? Tang Wuling replied with a faint smile. We were able to make it here, so our identities are no longer important. According to the safe harbor rule of the Battle God Hall, we have a right to challenge the Battle God Hall. The rules have changed, the metal ball declared, immediately following which a loud alarm was raised. Tang Wuling faltered slightly upon seeing this. This wasn't what Cao Daja had said would happen. According to Cao Daja, reaching an altitude of 2,500 meters above sea level would officially take them into Battle God Hall territory, and under normal circumstances, the safe harbor rule would apply at that point. Could it be that there were some extraordinary circumstances? As the alarm rang out, several dozen light beams immediately flashed toward the mountain summit from the Central Legion. The metal ball continued. In order to avoid unnecessary wastage of time, those without recommendation letters must pass the trial of the Central Legion and reach the mountain summit before they'll be able to challenge the Battle God Hall. As soon as its voice trailed off, the metal ball sped up toward the mountain summit. The mountain peak was at an altitude of over 4,000 meters above sea level, which meant that they still had over a kilometer to go. Tang Wuling couldn't afford to dwell on this mishap, and immediately yelled, "Let's go!" Thus, everyone no longer disguised their powers and released the full extent of their soul power, propelling themselves up the mountain like cannonballs. Several dozen mechas were flying toward them from down below, and Tang Wuling harumphed boldly as purplish blue lightning erupted out of his body. This was his lightning forest. With his current powers, lightning forest could encompass an enormous area, and even though the group of oncoming mechas was led by 3 black mechas, their internal soul cores would still be severely affected by the lightning, thereby resulting in major issues. Thus, all of the mechas immediately dispersed to avoid the lightning forest. Only then did Tang Wuling launch himself toward the mountain summit. With their powers, a distance of less than 2 kilometers could be covered in virtually the blink of an eye. Upon reaching the mountain summit, they discovered a massive metal gate embedded into the surface of the mountain. The gate was entirely black with countless menacing images carved onto its surface, some of which resembled soul beasts, while others resembled humans. Tang Wuling knew these were the gates of hell of the Battle God Hall. Entering through these gates, one would arrive in the Battle God Hall, and these gates were an examination in themselves. Without strength that exceeded 3 tons, it would be impossible to push them open. I'll get it. Araheng chuckled as he strode over to the gates of hell and pushed them open with ease, as if he were pushing open a door in his own house. Everyone flew into the Battle God Hall before the pursuing mechas could arrive, and the gates of hell swung shut again. The Central Legion mechas arrived right after the gates had swung completely shut, but at this point, they were already powerless to do anything. Beyond the gates of hell, the entire surrounding area was completely enshrouded in darkness. Welcome to the 18 levels of hell. A cold voice rang out, following which the ground began to tremor before slowly descending. Everyone gathered together with Ling Zichen at the center, and Tang Wuling released his spiritual power to keep tabs on the surrounding area. After around a minute, a dull thump rang out, and the tremors abruptly ceased. Immediately thereafter, the ground vanished beneath their feet without any warning. Tang Wuling and the others were already prepared, and they were able to hover in the air without plummeting downward. There was a massive net around 30 meters down below, so there was no risk of injury even if one were to fall straight down. A wide passageway appeared in their field of view, and the passageway was over 20 meters wide and around 5 meters tall. In the distance, dark red light could be seen up ahead. Having entered the Battle God Hall, a large portion of their mission was already complete. After advancing for around 100 meters through the passageway, a huge hall appeared. The hall was circular in shape, and there were complex solar rays engraved into the ground, the walls, and the ceiling. The red light that they had seen earlier was being released by none other than these solar rays. At this moment, there was another group of 10 people awaiting them. The rules of the Battle God Hall dictated that the number of battle gods deployed would match the number of challengers, and the powers of the battle gods deployed would be determined based on the cultivation ranks of the challengers. A group of 10 people like theirs was extremely rare, and it was impossible for there to be 10 battle gods on every level as there simply weren't enough battle gods. This was why Cao Daja had suggested that Tang Wuling bring so many people along with him. Chapter 1675. As such, once they conquered the first 2 levels, there was a very good chance that they would face some other trials instead of having to directly fight battle gods, and that would be far easier in comparison. The 10 battle gods all had different heights and figures, but they were all wearing retro black tight-fitting robes with red patterns. The one standing at the direct center of the group was a tall man with golden patterns instead of red on his robes, and it was clear that he was the leader of the group. Tang Wuling recalled that he had seen this man once during the Joust for a Spouse event. He was none other than the Vice Battle God Hall Master, Sky-crossing Douluo Guan Yue. He was a veteran battle god, and one of the 3 limit Douluos of the Battle God Hall. Just like Chen Xinji, Guan Yue was also a veteran limit Douluo, but he had been perpetually stuck at the quasi-demigod level, unable to cross into the demigod realm, so he was significantly less powerful than Chen Xinji. Even so, he was still a limit Douluo and a 4-word battle armor master, making him one of the most powerful beings in this world. A respectful look appeared on Tang Wuling's face at the sight of Guan Yue. Greetings, Hall Master Guan. He reverted back to his original appearance as he spoke, and Guan Yue didn't seem to be all that surprised to see this. Instead, he sighed. So you came, after all. Why put yourselves through this? Tang Wuling sighed. We have no choice. The Federation has forced our hand, and our Tang sect and Shrek Academy have always been ambassadors of peace. Having already entered the Battle God Hall, there was no need for him to hide his intentions any further. Guan Yue shook his head in response. It won't be easy to pass through us. You can still choose to leave now. Otherwise, you might not be able to. Tang Wuling smiled, and replied, I've always wanted to come to the Battle God Hall. I can't squander this opportunity. A meaningful look appeared in Guan Yue's eyes, and he said, in that case, you'll have to pass through us. The number of battle gods you manage to defeat will determine the number of people that will get to progress to the next level. Those who are defeated will be unable to progress. However, I'm sure the Central Legion is currently ready and waiting outside, and according to the rules of the Battle God Hall, once you leave, we have no duty to ensure your safety. I understand. Thank you for the reminder, Palace Master Guan. Let's begin now. Tang Wuling waved a hand as he spoke, and everyone fanned out beside him. Tang Wuling swept his gaze over the array of battle gods before them. It was undoubtedly the case that all of these battle gods were at the title Douluo level or above, and all of them, aside from Guan Yue, were wearing their corresponding numbers on their chests. Just as Guan Yue had said, each of them had to defeat a battle god if they wanted to progress. As such, Tang Wuling could theoretically get a weaker teammate to challenge Guan Yue to avoid having to face the limit Douluo, thereby granting him passage at the expense of a relatively unimportant member of the team. However, Tang Wuling had his own plan, which involved getting everyone to progress to the next level. One of the reasons he had revealed his own identity as soon as he had entered the battle god hall was as a display of power. He wanted to show the battle god hall and the Federation that aside from the older generation of limit Douluo, the younger generation of the Tang sect and Shrek Academy were also forces to be reckoned with. Guan Yue declared, "You can choose any battle god as your opponent, including myself. The winners will move on to the next level, while the losers will be asked to leave." Tang Wuling turned to his friends. "Who wants to go first?" "I'll go first," Shishi volunteered as he strode forward with a smile. Tang Wuling didn't say anything, and merely patted him on the shoulder. Shishi glanced at all of the battle gods before him, and said, "I want to challenge the ninth battle god." The battle god hall had 18 regular battle gods, as well as some backup battle gods. All of the battle gods present were regular ones, and the ninth one was right around the mid-range. Choosing one of the more powerful battle gods would make things easier for everyone else, and Shishi had chosen one in the mid-range to give everyone an idea of how powerful these battle gods were. The ninth battle god strode forward, while the others retreated with Guan Yue. The ninth battle god was quite thin and very ordinary in appearance. If he were in casual clothes, he would have been able to easily blend into any crowd. However, the fact that he was the ninth battle god indicated that his powers definitely belied his appearance. "Shishi of Shrek Academy, please enlighten me," Shishi said with a serious expression as he made an inviting hand gesture. Ever since he had begun pursuing Yuanan, he had worked extra hard in his cultivation in fear of being left too far behind by her, and the pressure on him had only increased since Yuanan had accepted her Yuanan family heritage. This was a family with 2 limit Douluos, and that wasn't even taking into account their quasi-god level patriarch. If he didn't work harder, he would be truly left in the dust. Thus, despite his usual happy-go-lucky demeanor, he had actually always been working extremely hard. Even his closest friends didn't know just how much he had sacrificed, and only Yuanan Yui was aware of the full extent of his crazy work ethic. As such, she didn't even scold Shishi now as she didn't want to pile additional pressure on him. "Ninth battle god of the battle god hall, lightning Douluo Zhang Zanheng, please enlighten me," the ninth battle god replied. Everything about him was very ordinary and placid, but for some reason, he gave off the feeling of the calm before the storm. Everyone already knew that all of the regular battle gods were titled Douluo, but this declaration still sent shivers down everyone's spines, particularly as they were in the battle god hall. The patterns on the walls and the ground suddenly dimmed slightly, following which a gentle light barrier appeared. A hint of intrigue appeared in Ling Zichen's eyes upon seeing this, and she murmured to herself, "This is a protective barrier formed solely by solar rays with no enhancement devices involved." Tang Wuling also had an extensive understanding of solar rays, but he naturally couldn't compare with the likes of Ling Zichen. "What does that entail?" Ling Zichen replied, "The fact that such a potent protective barrier can be released even without enhancement devices entails that the materials used to construct these solar rays are quite exceptional. It must be some type of top-grade alloy, which means that the battle god hall is essentially a treasure in itself. This protective solar ray definitely has external enhancement features, and once the energy within this place reaches a certain level, the enhancements will kick in to further bolster the barrier." "I see. The battle god hall has the Federation's full support, so it's no surprise that they have such good resources," Tang Wuling said. Ling Zichen replied, "If I had these materials, I would have done a much better job." "Of course. You're the best." Tang Wuling certainly wasn't going to argue against her. Chapter 1676. Within the protective barrier, Shishi and Zhang Zanheng were appraising one another with 30 meters between them, and their auras were beginning to change. The air around Zhang Zanheng was warping slightly, and it was apparent from his Douluo title that he was definitely a very offensively adept soulmaster. In contrast, not only was Shishi not releasing a powerful aura, he seemed to be on the verge of fading out of existence. In reality, only Tang Wuling had been heavily scrutinized and had his abilities dissected among Shrek's 7 monsters as he had appeared in public the most. In contrast, everyone else kept a very low profile, so even the battle god hall had very little information about them. In regard to Shishi, all they knew was that he was an agility attack system soulmaster. After all, no one had access to the files of Shrek Academy. Zhang Zanheng didn't underestimate Shishi just because the latter was very young. All of Shrek's 7 monsters were exceptional prodigies, as evidenced by their leader, who had defeated the entire Douluo Empire on his own. All of a sudden, both of them sprang into action as if it had been choreographed in advance. A resounding boom erupted from beneath Zhang Zanheng's feet, and he launched himself toward Shishi like a cannonball, while Shishi took on an illusionary form and evaded to the side. 9 soul rings, 5 purples and 4 blacks, emerged from Zhang Zanheng's body, while Shishi revealed 8 soul rings, 7 blacks and 1 orange golden. Black soul rings were the least attention-grabbing among all soul ring colors, yet the orange golden soul ring was extremely resplendent, creating a stark contrast with the other 7. All of the battle gods were naturally aware of what an orange golden soul ring entailed. This was a legendary soul ring that transcended even above red 100,000-year-old soul rings. As such, even though Shishi only had 8 soul rings, none of them were going to make the mistake of taking him lightly. Zhang Zanheng held a dark purple short spear in each hand, each of which was around 1.2 meters in length with lightning flashing along them. These lightning flame spears were his martial soul, and they possessed extremely fierce and explosive power. In response to Shishi's evasion, Zhang Zanheng plunged both of his spears into the ground at once, and a massive burst of dark purple light immediately erupted out of the ground before surging directly toward Shishi. Tang Wuling's heart stirred slightly upon seeing this. This wasn't just a reflection of Zhang Zanheng's power alone. He was also making use of the venue advantage. This was the battle god hall, so all of the battle gods were undoubtedly going to be more familiar with this place, thereby placing Tang Wuling and the others at a disadvantage. Shishi's body unfurled in midair, and he twisted around in an agile manner, then rose diagonally upward to evade the lightning flames. Zhang Zanheng's third soul ring lit up, and his lightning flame suddenly took on the shape of a sharp spear that followed Shishi in hot pursuit. On this occasion, it seemed like evasion would be impossible. However, Shishi's body suddenly split up into 2, and at the same time, he accelerated once again, just barely evading the oncoming attack once again. At the same time, both Shixies vanished in unison. Both sides were testing each other out and displaying their respective fortes. Zhang Zanheng pulled his lightning flame spears out of the ground before raising them high above his head, following which his 5th soul ring lit up, and a dark purple ring of light erupted outward from his spears. This was his 5th soul skill, lightning flame spirit array. The temperature on the entire first level abruptly rose drastically, and arcs of lightning began to appear within the expanding ring of light. This was a soul skill that covered a huge area, but wasn't a directly offensive one. Instead, it could greatly increase Zhang Zanheng's affinity with the lightning and fire elements in that area, thereby enhancing all of his other soul skills. Furthermore, this soul skill also acted as a radar that was scouring for the hidden Shishi. All of the battle gods were veteran combatants and had faced countless martial souls in the past, so they were always able to remain calm and formulate strategies regardless of the opponent. However, to Zhang Zanheng's surprise, his lightning flame spirit array already encompassed virtually the entire venue, but he still couldn't sense Shishi's presence. How had he managed to do this? Right as this thought appeared in Zhang Zanheng's mind, he was suddenly struck by a peculiar feeling, and he immediately rushed forward while lashing out with the lightning flame spear in his left hand, sweeping up a vast expanse of lightning flames that surged behind him. An illusionary Shishi appeared before curling up into a ball in the face of the oncoming lightning flames, quickly retreating by borrowing the propulsion force of the lightning flames. Zhang Zanheng's eyes immediately lit up as he prepared to give chase, but right at this moment, a sense of extreme peril welled up in his heart, and he dove forward without any hesitation. Almost at the exact same moment, a cold streak glanced past his back. Zhang Zanheng was a rank 93 titled Douluo, and at his level, he had great premonition when it came to danger. Thus, as soon as he sensed that something was wrong, he instinctively released his soul power. The cold streak behind him was extremely sharp and had appeared in a very abrupt manner. Everyone could clearly see that the soul power released by Zhang Zanheng had been sliced apart, and even though he had reacted very quickly, the cold streak had still torn through the clothes on his back. He immediately twisted around while sweeping his lightning flame spears backward, and at the same time, his second soul ring lit up as he released a massive burst of lightning flames to force out the sharp soul power that had infiltrated his body. At this point, Zhang Zanheng was already drenched in cold sweat. If it weren't for his natural premonition as a titled Douluo, the battle would have most likely already ended. It was clear that everything up to this point had been a trap set by Shishi, and the clone that had been struck by the wave of lightning flames was already long gone. After failing in his sneak attack, Shishi disappeared once again, but two clones had suddenly emerged on either side of Zhang Zanheng, both of which were attacking him at once. On top of that, a cold streak was also descending toward him from above. As a titled Douluo level assault system soulmaster, Zhang Zanheng shouldn't be having this much trouble against an agility attack system soulmaster, but Shishi was simply far too fast, and he didn't know anything about Shishi's abilities. As a result, he was immediately forced onto the back foot. He injected his soul power into his lightning flame spears with all his might, and lightning flames surged out of his body like a volcanic eruption to oppose all of the oncoming attacking figures. However, once all of those clones disappeared, Shishi was nowhere to be seen again. The other battle gods were stunned to see this. If they were in Zhang Zanheng's shoes, how would they fare? Were Shrek's 7 monsters this powerful already? According to the Battle God Hole's files, Shrek's 7 monsters were definitely still in their 20s. Furthermore, this was only one of the more obscure members of Shrek's 7 monsters. How powerful would their leader, Tang Wulin, be? Chapter 1677. Zhang Zanheng's expression remained unchanged, but he was feeling quite frustrated. He had undoubtedly been forced onto the back foot, and even his clothes had been torn. Furthermore, he had definitely expended far more soul power than Shishi during that sequence of clashes, so he had fallen to a severe disadvantage. Since when did it become so difficult for titled Douluos to face Soul Douluo? At the same time, neither his spiritual power nor his soul skills could detect his opponent's exact location, and that was extremely troublesome. Should he release his battle armor to enhance his offensive, defensive, and sensory capabilities? Under the protection of his battle armor, it would be far more difficult for his opponent to break through his defenses. However, he was the 9th battle god of the Battle God Hall, while his opponent was only a Soul Douluo. He didn't want to be the one to release his battle armor first. There were so many of his colleagues and even the Vice Hallmaster present, he would be embarrassing himself if he were to release his battle armor first. In a battle between Soulmasters, the one who released their battle armor first was essentially making a concession of inferiority, and that was unacceptable to Zhang Zanheng. All of a sudden, the light around him abruptly dimmed slightly. Zhang Zanheng hurriedly focused his attention and thrust both of his spears forward. Lightning flames erupted in all directions around him, and he was confident that regardless of where Shishi was, he would be forced to appear in the face of this attack. Unleashing such an attack would expend a lot of his power, but as a titled Douluo, he could afford to do this against an opponent of an inferior cultivation rank. Right at this moment, Zhang Zanheng was struck by the feeling that his lightning flames were being stirred up, and a series of extremely sharp auras swept toward him from all directions like a flurry of sharp blades. He hurriedly increased the output of his lightning flames, but it was still being torn to shreds. Zhang Zanheng didn't dare to take any chances, and he immediately released his 6th soul skill, upon which a ball of lightning flames instantly erupted out of his body like a blooming flower. This was his 6th soul skill, Lightning Flame Blossom, another wide range attack. Zhang Zanheng stood within the blooming flower of lightning flames, looking as if he were a godly figure. However, right at this moment, he was suddenly struck by a sense of disorientation, following which a streak of light reached him in a flash. Even his almighty Lightning Flame Blossom was completely unable to stop the streak of light. Zhang Zanheng was naturally very alarmed by this, and he instinctively tried to release his battle armor in this dire situation. However, a burst of pain suddenly erupted within his body. The sharp aura that had previously infiltrated his body had been cleared out by his lightning flames, but it had suddenly reappeared, throwing him off and preventing him from releasing his battle armor. Thus, the streak of light instantly branded itself onto his head, and his mind immediately congealed. He could still sense everything happening around him, but he was completely immobilized, and even the lightning flames around him had dissipated. An illusionary figure then instantly materialized before him. It was none other than Shishi. Shishi was holding a pair of daggers, which he placed against Zhang Zanheng's neck. At this moment, his right arm and torso was entirely encased in battle armor. This wasn't a full suit of battle armor, and it had an illusionary appearance, making it impossible for one to see the armor clearly, but it definitely existed. That's 4-word battle armor. Guan Yue exclaimed. The other battle gods couldn't identify this, but as a limit Douluo and 4-word battle armor master himself, Guan Yue was naturally able to. Suits of 4-word battle armor were essentially intelligent life forms, and they all had unique auras. In critical situations, they could even battle in the place of the wearer. Furthermore, pieces of 4-word battle armor would resonate with one another, and that was what had alerted Guan Yue. Thank you for the battle. Shishi withdrew his daggers, and only then did Zhang Zanheng recover from his paralysis. At this moment, Zhang Zanheng realized that he had made a fatal and unforgivable mistake. He had refrained from releasing his battle armor as he wanted to save face, but his opponent was constantly lurking in the shadows, and he didn't even know if Shishi had released his battle armor or not. That streak of light that had ended the battle seemed to be very ordinary, but that was far from the case. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been able to easily pierce through his 6th soul skill and leave him completely powerless. The protective barrier in the Battle God Hall wasn't soundproof, so he had heard Guan Yue as well. Shishi's suit of battle armor was incomplete, but it was 4-word battle armor. With the enhancements provided by those pieces of 4-word battle armor, Shishi had already bridged the gap between their cultivation ranks. Regardless of how reluctant Zhang Zanheng was to accept defeat, he had no choice but to do so. Furthermore, this was a crushing and humiliating defeat. What was that streak of light? It was Shishi's 8th soul skill, which he had barely ever displayed even in front of his friends. The soul skill's name was Phasing Spike, and it was capable of phasing through space and time, making it virtually impossible to ward off. If Zhang Zanheng had donned his suit of 3-word battle armor, he would have been able to nullify a part of the soul skill's power, but Shishi had correctly predicted that he would be too proud to release his battle armor. In contrast, Shishi had no such qualms, and he had unleashed his most powerful attack, while Zhang Zanheng was still testing out Shishi's abilities. This wasn't his only 8th soul skill, but it was his most powerful control soul skill. Furthermore, it was imbued with immense destructive power as well. If he hadn't withdrawn the second stage of that attack, Zhang Zanheng's mind would have been directly impacted, and that was very likely to cause permanent injury. Even if Zhang Zanheng had been prepared and donned his suit of battle armor, Shishi's Phasing Spike, which was enhanced by his pieces of 4-word battle armor, would still most likely have been too much for Zhang Zanheng to withstand. All of the battle gods had fallen completely silent, as had Tang Wulin and everyone else. Even they were stunned by how quickly Shishi had won, let alone their opponents. As Shishi made his way back to the group, Tang Wulin suddenly recalled something that Yali had said not long ago. At the time, she had told Tang Wulin that Shishi had improved significantly of late, and that if he were to keep this up, there was a very good chance he would become the #1 agility attack system soulmaster on the continent. Tang Wulin had thought that Yali was trying to encourage Shishi, but it seemed that her words weren't all that far-fetched. Shishi wasn't even a titled Douluo yet, but he could already defeat the 9th battle god. Even more importantly, Tang Wulin discovered that Shishi was currently different from his past self. In his past battles, there were still some discernible patterns, but now, he was completely unpredictable, and his attacks were ridiculously diverse, to the point that even Tang Wulin couldn't predict them anymore. Chapter 1678. During the past few months, Tang Wulin had spent the vast majority of his time focusing on heavenly refinement to produce suits of 4-word battle armor for everyone. Once everyone's suits of 4-word battle armor were completed, they would undergo a complete transformation. As such, he hadn't trained together much with everyone else, and they had mostly all focused on their own cultivation. Looking at things now, it seems that his friends had evolved far faster than he imagined, and they would have to begin training together again soon. Did I do well, boss? Shishi asked with a smile. Tang Wulin gave him a thumbs up, yet just as Shishi was walking past him, he said, I want to try that as well. Let's spar together after we get back. Shishi almost tripped over his own feet upon hearing this, and his smile instantly faded. Assault system soulmasters naturally suppressed agility attack system soulmasters, and Tang Wulin was certainly no Zhang Zanheng. His mental manifestation level spiritual power was going to be far more effective for detecting Shishi, and even more importantly, Shishi had an instinctive fear of Tang Wulin due to his Golden Dragon King bloodline. That's what you get for showing off. Yuan and Yue Zhengyu chuckled in unison. She extended an insulting hand gesture toward Yue Zhengyu, then raised his head in a proud manner. In any case, he had completed his mission. Right at this moment, the most portly of the battle gods stepped forward. This man's waist circumference most likely exceeded his height, and he wore a benevolent smile, reminding Tang Wulin and the others of smiling Douluo Hujie. He patted his own stomach and said, I heard that there's a member of your Shrek 7 monsters with stuffed buns as their martial soul. My martial soul also has something to do with food. Why don't we have a match together? This man was the 14th battle god. Shu Lizzie faltered slightly upon hearing this. It was outside of the normal conventions of the battle god hall for a battle god to challenge a challenger. However, seeing as the proposal had already been made, there was no reason for him to back down. He took a glance at Tang Wulin, who gave him a nod of approval. Shu Lizzie was still a support system soulmaster, but his cultivation had taken a rather interesting turn of late. Furthermore, the opponent was only the 14th battle god, so Tang Wulin saw no issue in allowing Shu Lizzie to face him. Thus, Shu Lizzie strode forward, and he was even fatter than his opponent. Shu Lizzie of Shrek Academy, please enlighten me. The 14th battle god replied. 14th battle god of the battle god hall, Gluttony Douluo Ling Chen, please enlighten me. Gem. Shu Lizzie faltered slightly upon hearing this. No, not gem. Gluttony, as in violently gorging on food. Hee. Shu Lizzie's eyelids twitched slightly upon hearing this. This guy wasn't going to eat him, was he? Furthermore, with such a strange Douluo title, what was his martial soul going to be? Come, let's spend some quality fatso time together. In contrast with the cold and forbidding Zhang Zanheng, Ling Chen seemed to be very chatty and bubbly. Shu Lizzie smiled and replied, sure. Thus, the second match became the clash of the fatties. Both of them strode into the protective barrier, and Ling Chen maintained a benevolent smile as he made an inviting hand gesture. Should we begin? Sure. Shu Lizzie replied as he nodded with a serious expression. How about you give me a stuffed bun to eat? Ling Chen chuckled as he sprang into action. To everyone's surprise, despite his rotund frame, he was able to squat down extraordinarily quickly before launching himself forward like a cannonball, reaching Shu Lizzie in a flash. He reached out with his hands, and a pair of short and thin sticks appeared in his grasp before being thrust toward Shu Lizzie's stomach. Holy SHT, this guy's an agility attack system soulmaster. Shu Lizzie knew that he had fallen into a trap. Support system soulmasters feared agility attack system soulmasters the most as the latter were too fast and didn't give the former any time to defend themselves. Shu Lizzie knew that there was no point in evading with his lackluster speed, so he merely remained on the spot. He took a half step backward with his right foot to create a more solid base, then thrust his palms forward, and his aura also underwent a drastic transformation, making him resemble an immovable mountain. Two crisp clangs rang out, and the two short sticks were repelled by Shu Lizzie's mysterious jade hands, while he was also sent gliding backward. Ling Chen was rather surprised to see this, but he didn't stop even for a split second as he began to spin like a top, almost instantly reaching Shu Lizzie from behind. Shu Lizzie hurriedly spun around, using his mysterious jade hands to defend himself again. Ling Chen was very fast, but Shu Lizzie was also very agile, spinning around on the spot to protect himself from all directions with his mysterious jade hands. A string of clashes quickly took place, and it seemed that Shu Lizzie was in a very bad situation as he didn't even have time to release his martial soul. In reality, his martial soul was stuffed buns, so releasing it wouldn't have been very effective anyway. Thus, it seems that Ling Chen had gained an absolute advantage from the get-go. However, instead of being pleased to see this, Guan Yue's brows had furrowed slightly. Even if Ling Chen were to win this match, there was nothing to be happy about. There was no glory in an agility attack system titled Douluo beating a food system soulmaster of a lower cultivation rank. Furthermore, Guan Yue noticed that none of Shrek's 7 monsters were worried about his current situation, and that was very abnormal. Perhaps this was an indication that they were very confident in Shu Lizzie. The ease of Shishi's victory could partially be attributed to complacency from Zhang Zanheng, but the power displayed by Shishi had indeed far surpassed the battle god's expectations anyway. Shrek's 7 monsters had always kept a low profile, and their power, as well as their strange martial souls, came as a huge surprise. Shu Lizzie and Shishi were both members of Shrek's 7 monsters. Would one really be that much worse than the other? One had to realize that there had been another food system soulmaster in the history of the Tang sect and Shrek Academy who had possessed extraordinary combat prowess. His name was food god Douluo Oscar. Thus, Guan Yue was still feeling quite tense and apprehensive. In his eyes, this was a stern examination for the battle gods, as well as an opportunity for them to understand more about Shrek's 7 monsters. All of a sudden, a louder clang than usual rang out, and Shu Lizzie's hands were flung apart, leaving him completely vulnerable. It seemed that he was finally unable to withstand Ling Chen's sustained assaults. During the course of his attacks, Ling Chen had unleashed many soul skills such as penetrate, explode, and tear, and even mysterious jade hands wouldn't be able to last for long. Chapter 1679. Ling Chen immediately drew closer and thrust his short sticks toward Shu Lizzie's chest. Was it already over? Just as most of the battle gods thought that Shu Lizzie would lose this match even before he had released his martial soul, a ball of light suddenly began to glow in front of Shu Lizzie's chest. A resounding clang rang out, and it was Ling Chen that was forced back. He felt as if his short sticks had struck an impregnable fortress. A smile appeared on Shu Lizzie's face as a string of soul rings emerged from beneath his feet, and at the same time, a huge cuirass was revealed to have appeared in front of his chest. This was a piece of battle armor, and it was shaped like a stuffed bun. Indeed, this stuffed bun-shaped cuirass was quite comical in appearance, but the faint rainbow light it was radiating clearly indicated that it was a piece of 4-word battle armor. How was it possible that both members of Shrek's 7 monsters who had appeared in battle thus far possessed pieces of 4-word battle armor? Since when was it that 4-word battle armor had become so common? One had to realize that Zhenhua was essentially retired from heavenly refinement. In addition to the pieces of 4-word battle armor displayed by Shrek's 7 monsters during Shrek Academy's enrollment day, it was clear that the rumors about Tang Wulin being a divine blacksmith were true. Due to his physical health, Zhenhua's heavenly refinement success rate was very low, and he barely ever took heavenly refinement jobs now. Thus, the emergence of a new and outrageously young divine blacksmith was undoubtedly going to shake the entire Soulmaster world. To put it in simpler terms, if Tang Wulin were willing to make some concessions, they would even agree to protect him and escort him safely out of the Central Legion. No one wanted to offend a divine blacksmith, especially high-grade Soulmasters. After all, who didn't want a suit of 4-word battle armor? 4-word battle armor masters were definitely the most powerful beings in the Soulmaster world. Even though Guan Yue was only a quasi-demigod, he would be able to contend with a quasi-god provided that his opponent didn't have a suit of 4-word battle armor, and that was sufficient testament to just how incredible suits of 4-word battle armor were. Don't judge a stuffed bun by its folds. Shu Lizzie finally had a chance to release his martial soul. A total of 9 soul rings emerged from beneath his feet, all of which were black. Shu Lizzie had consumed the chaotic element Immortal Herb, thereby disqualifying him from fusing with a 100,000-year-old soul spirit. But the benefits brought to him by the chaotic element Immortal Herb were definitely not inferior to those provided by a 100,000-year-old soul spirit. That's right, Shu Lizzie was already a titled Douluo. He had made the breakthrough not long ago, and this was made even more extraordinary by the fact that he was a food system soulmaster. Generally speaking, it was countless times more difficult for a food system soulmaster to become a titled Douluo. If it weren't for the consumption of the chaotic element Immortal Herb allowing him to reach full mastery of his mysterious heaven method, there was no way he would have been able to reach this level. The foundation behind power was always laid from sufficient resources. After quickly chanting his incantation, Shu Lizzie summoned 3 stuffed buns and stuffed them into his mouth before Ling Chen could attack again. He then glowered at Ling Chen as if to say, "You're a scam artist." Instead of immediately springing into action again, Ling Chen was appraising Shu Lizzie's cuirass with a hint of envy in his eyes. 4-word battle armor really is different. Also, I never lied to you, little fatso. My Douluo title really is gluttony, and I really am a huge fan of food. Otherwise, my figure wouldn't be like this. Take a look at my martial soul. These are chopsticks. Haha, chopsticks are most definitely related to food, so don't say I lied to you. Chopsticks. Tang Wulin and the others were left speechless upon hearing this. There were countless types of martial souls, so it wasn't a surprise that a chopsticks martial soul existed, but Ling Chen was most likely the only soulmaster in history to have cultivated chopsticks to the title Douluo level. Shu Lizzie choked down a recovery pork bun, agility mini soup bun, and bloodthirsty red bean bun, then said, "Come at me." Ling Chen smiled and replied, "Sure, let me show you my battle armor." He wasn't going to make the same mistake as Zhang Zanheng. Even against a food system soulmaster, he had to take his opponent seriously. Agility attack system soulmasters were mostly quite lackluster in defense, so he had to be extra careful. A layer of pink light radiated from his body, and a suit of thin and light battle armor quickly appeared. This was a pink suit of battle armor, and in conjunction with his rotund frame, it created quite an Interesting package. Ling Chen was completely unfazed by this, and he summoned his battle armor domain, upon which a layer of pink light also appeared over the chopsticks in his hands. The name of my battle armor domain is Spatial Skip. Shu Lizzie was immediately struck by a sense of foreboding upon hearing this. In the next instant, pink light had already spread over the entire venue. Ling Chen was very smart and was renowned for his ability to think during battles. He had noticed that Shishi's Suda 4-word battle armor was incomplete, and up to this point, Shu Lizzie had only released a cuirass as well, which meant that his Suda 4-word battle armor was most likely also incomplete. That made sense, considering how difficult it was to complete a Suda 4-word battle armor. Not only was a divine blacksmith required, extensive efforts from 9th rank mecha makers would also be needed. Not to mention that this was a very time-consuming process. Incomplete suits of battle armor didn't possess domains, so even though individual pieces of 4-word battle armor were quite powerful, an incomplete suit was inferior to a complete suit of 3-word battle armor when the bigger picture was concerned. Ling Chen was taking Shu Lizzie very seriously, and he had released his battle armor domain from the get-go. Judging from the domain's name, it was quite apparent what its effect would be. He was intentionally informing Shu Lizzie of this in order to exert more psychological pressure upon him. The pink light had already encompassed the entire venue, so it would be impossible for Shu Lizzie to escape out of this domain. In the next instant, Ling Chen vanished amid a flash of light, then suddenly reappeared in the distance. Isn't my domain fun? He didn't possess any spatial abilities, but through the use of his domain, he could elevate his speed to the very max, making it look as if he could teleport within the scope of his domain. After another flash of light, Ling Chen appeared behind Shu Lizzie before thrusting his chopsticks toward the back of Shu Lizzie's neck. Shu Lizzie instinctively stumbled forward while twisting around and thrusting his hands backward, releasing 2 purplish black stuffed buns. Chapter 1680. Ling Chen activated the effect of his domain again, and he appeared directly in front of Shu Lizzie. Shu Lizzie was still in the process of falling forward, so it looked like he was diving toward his opponent's chopsticks. The destructive explosive bun he released exploded, and the entire protective barrier trembled slightly. All of a sudden, Shu Lizzie's body twisted around in a maneuver that seemed to be physically impossible, and he just barely glanced past the chopsticks. A hint of surprise appeared on Ling Chen's face. He hadn't anticipated that Shu Lizzie would suddenly accelerate. Was this an enhancement he was receiving from his martial soul? It most likely had something to do with the stuffed buns he had just eaten. That's enough fun and games, Shu Lizzie suddenly declared. Ling Chen's heart jolted upon hearing this, and he immediately activated his domain to try and spring back in retreat. It was clearly a wise decision to retreat in the face of unknown danger. However, to his astonishment, his spatial skip failed to take effect. At the same time, a suit of yellow battle armor that was radiating faint rainbow light completely encased Shu Lizzie's entire body. Simultaneously, a yellow domain was released, which instantly devoured his entire domain. This was domain suppression. This was a 4-word battle armor domain. All of the battle gods immediately erupted into a frenzy. Suits of incomplete and complete 4-word battle armor were entirely different concepts. A suit of 4-word battle armor could elevate a normal title Douluo to close to the limit Douluo level. Who could have imagined that a food system soulmaster could become a title Douluo and attain a suit of 4-word battle armor? It simply didn't make sense. Unbeknownst to them, Shu Lizzie's 4-word battle armor was the first complete suit among all of Shrek's 7 monsters, and he was only able to use it after reaching the title Douluo level. As a food system soulmaster, Shu Lizzie was the most vulnerable of Shrek's 7 monsters, so it was decided that his suit of 4-word battle armor would be completed first to give him the best self-preservation assets. A 4-word battle armor domain was naturally able to completely dominate a 3-word battle armor domain, so there was no way that Ling Chen's spatial skip would continue to work. In the next instant, his world was plunged into complete darkness. From the outside, everyone could see that a massive steamer with a diameter in excess of 50 meters had appeared at the center of the venue, while Ling Chen was nowhere to be seen. A string of violent explosions rang out, and bursts of devastating destructive aura battered the protective barrier incessantly. This was Shu Lizzie's martial soul true body, steamer. Furthermore, it was enhanced by his suit of 4-word battle armor. Guan Yue finally understood where this persistent sense of foreboding in his heart was coming from. Not only had Ling Chen not tricked Shu Lizzie, he was the one who had been tricked instead. With a full suit of 4-word battle armor, he would most likely be able to defeat even higher ranked battle gods. After witnessing Shu Lizzie's 4-word battle armor, all of the battle gods were forced to reevaluate Tang Wuling's group. In reality, Tang Wuling felt like this had been the perfect opponent for Shu Lizzie. Even though he was already a title Douluo with a suit of 4-word battle armor, he was still a support system soulmaster, and his 8th and 9th soul skills were both support system ones that couldn't enhance his offensive prowess by much. As such, if he were to encounter a more powerful battle god who was able to force their way out of his steamer, then he would be in some trouble. In that case, he would be forced to outlast his opponent in a grueling battle, and that clearly wouldn't be ideal given that there were still many more levels to be conquered. The string of explosions lasted over 10 seconds before the steamer was abruptly opened, and Ling Chen was tossed out like a rucksack. He was already unconscious, and his entire body had been stained a purplish black color. The steamer vanished amid a flash of light, and Shu Lizzie reappeared with a smile on his face. His battle armor had been withdrawn, and his face was slightly pale. At his current cultivation rank, it was still quite strenuous for him to use a suit of 4-word battle armor, and he was only able to do so due to his abundant soul power and exceptional foundation. Thus, the second victory was secured. A faint smile appeared on Tang Wuling's face, and he gave Shu Lizzie a huge hug. Shu Lizzie chuckled. He wanted to eat me, so I steamed him. She praised in a genuine voice. You're becoming more and more impressive, fatty. Shu Lizzie glared at him and asked, what you're going to say next is but you're still not quite on my level, right? She immediately nodded in response, upon which everyone rolled their eyes at him, and even Yu Xinglin's gaze was drawn toward him. She instantly became a lot more tame in the face of Yu Xinglin's stern gaze. The two people he feared the most among Shrek's 7 monsters were Yuan and Yui and Yu Xinglin. He wasn't afraid of Tang Wuling as they were essentially a pair of brothers, but those two women were not to be messed with. Thus, 2 victories had been secured, both of which were in crushing fashion. Had the 4-word battle armor been the difference? That could be argued, but at the same time, Shishi and Shu Lizzie had displayed astonishing power. A 4-word battle armor master would always be at the peak of the soul master world, and any power that could recruit a 4-word battle armor master would be boosted significantly. In the past, Shrek Academy only had 2 4-word battle armor masters and only 2 limit Douluo, in addition to the 2 limit Douluo from the Tang sect. 4 4-word battle armor masters was already an astonishing lineup, yet a new one had just been thrown into the mix, and he was so young as well. With a divine blacksmith among its ranks, Shrek Academy would be able to essentially mass produce 4-word battle armor masters given sufficient time. This was the most shocking thing to the battle gods. Guan Yue couldn't help but lament the Federation's idiocy. They had completely misjudged Shrek Academy and the Tang sect. With one person leading both of those superpowers, it could be said that this was a single unified superpower organization. With a divine blacksmith thrown into the mix, their resurgence was something that the federal government could no longer repress. Tang Wuling and everyone else had come to the battle god hall precisely to illustrate this point. Guan Yue was naturally aware the Federation had tried to force the Tang sect's hand, and now it was being met by retaliation from both the Tang sect and Shrek Academy. Furthermore, none of the limit Douluos had been deployed, so the blame could be entirely pushed onto the younger generation. Thus, even if they were to lose, the consequences wouldn't be dire. However, looking at things now, would the battle god hall really be able to defeat them? Right at this moment, another person emerged from Tang Wuling's group. It was none other than Star God Douluo Yu Xinglin. Yu Xinglin was extremely beautiful, but her expression was very cold, and her eyes were filled with single-minded focus. Her long hair was arranged into a neat and tidy ponytail, and as she emerged from the group, she was like a sharp sword being pulled out of its scabbard. Thanks so much for watching this video. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Also leave a comment down below with suggestions on what novels to read.